or you want to hear a woodworker talking about how they like to do certain things to finish their pieces. As educators, I think we're stuck in our bubbles, and so much of what we learn is about education from other educators. But I think if we get out of that little bubble that we stick ourselves inside, there's a lot more learning that we can be exposed to. And we can take that back, and it means something to us as educators.
If you listen to episode 113, last week's episode with Rod Lucier, we talk a lot about a new way of doing professional learning and really kind of going outside the traditional models that we've most come to experience and expect. And Andy McKiel is really representative of that very first time that I thought, wow, this is different. And we tell the story of me just happening to be in Winnipeg for a conference and getting invited to this pub. It's to just have these very casual, but also pretty, I think, significant conversations about teaching and learning. And so that was my first foray into, oh, you don't have to sit in a classroom or, in a conference center to have professional learning. And that clip that you just heard from Andy, I think speaks to the fact that not only do you not have to sit in those spaces, but you can learn from people who aren't necessarily in education. And I've really become to be a big believer and admirer from learning from outside of our own bubble and perspective. We do a lot of that. That's obviously the majority of our professional learning. But Andy was one who began kind of in a visionary work and really took it to the next level. I have been part of many of his, and we've worked together on these kind of Ignite sessions and just other experiences, ed campy kind of things, where we just tried to do things a little differently and just, shift the paradigm, if you will, of professional learning. And Andy's just been doing that his whole career. And I just so appreciated his contributions to particularly the Manitoba education scene, ed tech scene. And it was just really important for me to have Andy on the show just to share a little bit about his journey and more about some of the insights that he's gleaned over the years around professional learning, as well as just general sort of educational technology conversations. Enjoy my conversation today with ed tech consultant, Andy McKiel. Sometimes, Andy, I like to start podcasts with a question of, do you remember the first time I'll say met or connected? You can decide whatever version of that. I'm always curious to hear your version of the story.
I would say it was one of the same. We met and connected the same night, and I do remember it as clear as day. I forgot the year, but I actually just looked it up. It was the fall of 2007.
Yeah.
And I was organizing an event that we called the Manitoba EduBlogger Con. And we collected a whole bunch of folks from around the province in one room so we could talk a little bit about how we can leverage some of these tools and leverage social media platforms to be able to connect and make a difference. And so you were in Manitoba for something the following day. And so a bunch of us got together. I think we packed the room with close to 100 people, and it was an amazing evening. And I had no idea who you were that night when you showed up. I just remember that it was a room full of Manitobans, and I think you might have shown up wearing your your Rough Riders jersey.
I did. Yeah, I think there is a picture somewhere of that particular night. And Alec Koros, I think, came in virtually. We had him come in. And I think, if I recall, there was maybe somebody, I know it was like a Jeff Utek or somebody from China, maybe.
Yeah, Jeff Utek was there.
Yeah, came in virtually. And that was, again, I think about 2007, and I was working in a school division here in Moose Jaw, and all of this stuff was very new and very exciting. So even just the idea, and I'm trying to recall how I ended up there, whether it was through like maybe a Darren Kurapatra or somebody that I had some other pretty loose connection with, but I saw this thing was posted somewhere. This sounds like a cool thing. And anyway, it just goes from there. Yeah, no, that would be my recollection too. So we were playing like the newlywed game. We would both get a point in that kind of thing. So,
well, and those were like the earliest days of Twitter too, right? So it was probably a tweet you saw from somewhere. And
it was a Skype. That's right. I'm sure that's what it was. And I remember using Skype and all these kind of tools that are, I think there's,
Ustream.tv, I think, was our
yes,
live streaming platform of choice at that point.
yeah, yeah, no,
Yeah.
those are very, so maybe, and we'll just do a little bit of a backup from there. Talk a little bit about what you were doing in 2007 and maybe how you got there, what's evolved since there. Here we are, these 19 years later.
Okay, I feel like that's a great way to start this conversation because really, I feel like that was a good turning point in my life. I started in education at the turn of the century. I was a grade four classroom teacher, and at that point in time, I was still a grade four classroom teacher. But I was seeing the role that technology had in my classroom and all the classrooms in my school, the impact it was having on the tools I could use to teach and the ways that my kids could share their thinking and share their learning. And so I had actually just before that made a pitch to my school division that we really needed someone in the role where they're not just co-teaching in their own school and helping other teachers out and other classes out with different projects. We need someone who can move between schools throughout the school division doing that same thing. And I always likened it to cross-pollinating. And I pitched this idea to our tech director at the time. I had never met the guy before, but he took the time out of his schedule to come meet with me over a lunch hour in my classroom, pitched the idea just to get it off my chest, and it went nowhere at all. Or so I thought. But about 3 months later, my colleague down the hall sent me a message saying, "Hey, did you see that email that just came out?" And it was a job posting for basically bullet for bullet what I had described as a need. And so I ended up getting this position at the district level, supporting teachers K to 12. And I've been doing it ever since. The name has changed a little bit, but it's still the same kind of job, creating professional learning opportunities for teachers, getting into classrooms to model the tools, whatever ways I can get information out to teachers and really try and build capacity within our school district. That's what I do.
Think
Yeah.
about those. Yeah. So I wasn't aware of that kind of, that's a great story. So here at night, you probably, I don't know who's keeping track of these things or where these stats live, but you probably are one of the longest serving people in that kind of role with digital and coaching and so forth. So you have this trajectory of many years of this. And I'm not so much interested in, I think we all can think about the trajectory of digital technologies in schools from one to mobile to wireless to, well, all the things in that respect. I'm thinking more about in terms of either teacher impact of what you tried to support in that time, or just change in the way in which teachers thinking about the role of digital in their classroom. It's a slightly open-ended question, but just seeing if you can give us a little bit of a trajectory of back then and now.
I feel like back then, almost 20 years ago, there were still certainly teachers using technology within their classrooms, but it looked a little bit different. We didn't have as many teachers at that time that were really harnessing the technology so that kids could create content to show what they know, to share their thinking in very visible ways. So I feel like back then, there was an appetite for learn. There was an appetite to learn more about what these tools are and what they can do. I didn't feel like I had to push my way into very many classrooms or very many schools. I was always invited, and people were thirsty for the kinds of things that I was there to share. And I would say in some ways that's still the case today, but I feel like the tools are a little more kind of omnipresent. There's a lot of folks that have a pretty good sense of what the tools can do
Mm,
for them, but now they opt not to use them, or they're using them and they don't need as much support because I'm not the only guy that knows how to
sure.
support them. So I still get lots of questions about very specific things within the specific platforms, but a lot of it is bigger ideas. People come to
Hmm.
me asking about how could I do this or how could I do that? And it's not so much about the specific tools, it's about what the tools can do for them
Right.
in some ways.
Yeah, I guess the other thing I want to tease out of that is there's definitely a narrative, and listen, you can take whatever perspective you want, or I would say others take different perspectives. There's the narrative that says, gee whiz, we've had technologies in the schools for 20, 25 years, and it hasn't done what we thought it would do. So that is a narrative that exists, that it's not really changed much. And I honestly, I guess I probably could make arguments on both sides of that to counter that somewhat. Because I have to, I'm just a little tired of the constant barrage of teachers don't change, schools are the same, all this stuff. And I go, I don't think that's true necessarily. But again, I'm one person, I have one perspective. You're one person, you have one perspective, large, obviously focusing in one school division. But like, how do you respond to that if somebody said, yeah, Andy, you've been doing this for 19 years and nothing's changed?
It's in some ways, if all you wanted to do is look at the data and see, try and find some measurable results from how the technology has impacted teaching and learning, I don't know what those results would show us. I don't know that we would see a significant increase in our numbers just because the technology's there. I really think it depends on who's using the technology and what they're using it for. But I do know that our student population is far more needy and far more at risk than they were 20 years ago. We just see so many more challenges creeping into every single one of our classrooms, so many more students that require additional support for a variety of reasons, whether they're newcomers and English is not their first language and they need support with translation, or maybe they're having difficulties reading, and we know that dyslexia is very much on the rise, and more of our students are being identified as having some of these additional challenges. So the tools are making a huge difference for us. Can you imagine where we would be right now if we didn't have ready access to some of those features and functionality? So it's hard to make an argument about the tools themselves when the tools are just such a big part of what we do all the time. Yet there are still teachers that don't have any idea about how easily the devices that students carry in their pockets could translate content for them.
Go hand in hand with pedagogy as well. So if we think about inquiry-based learning and those kind of things, inquiry-based learning is highly amplified by the use of technology. And we know that there's teachers who still, that's a difficult, because it's not easy, right? Inquiry-based learning is challenging. And so to shift your pedagogy to embrace those kind of things is still in the works. And so again, I would just concur with, I think there's, if you're just looking at in terms of that kind of PISA scores or whatever metric you have. And I think most of us realized pretty early on, like this is not the way to measure this. This is not how we're talking about this. We have like you said, we have an evolving society where the needs have changed. And these are the ways in which we can help mitigate some of that disruption in whatever way that is to make it easier for kids to learn. And now, of course, AI is bringing in a brand new conversation, again, wrought with all kinds of challenges and concerns and rightly. But anyway, yeah. But I want to get into kind of the real reason, the thing I wanted to focus on in our conversation, and goes back to that original story about this edu-blogger day or whatever. So you, of all the people I know, have a strong kind of history and or gift, if you will, in working towards innovative learning, professional learning experiences. So maybe talk about how that kind of came, like where this sense of we should probably do things differently, and maybe talk about that journey that you've been on during these last 19 years.
Okay. So I feel like a lot of it actually grew from my time in the classroom, realizing that, I could have a great impact with the students that I was teaching and all the students within my school through the work I was doing, but just seeing how much more was out there and how much more was possible. And I think as some of those tools started emerging, when Twitter was brand new and all I did is started following educators in different places, I got so much inspiration and I learned so much, but I wanted to share the things I was learning. And I started to connect with different people beyond my school division and also within my school division in more meaningful ways. And so I was just always looking for ways that I could build those connections and build that community. And it didn't always happen just in a professional learning day or a after school meeting where teachers came together. I always wanted to do something a little bit more than that, where we would come together just socially. And it was really more about the networking than the teaching and the learning that was happening. So I was also involved at that time when I was still in the classroom in Manitoba through our union, Manitoba Teachers Society. They have a number of special area groups of educators. So they really drive professional learning for different subsets of educators. So the math teachers have their own SAGE, or Special Area Group of Educators. SAGE group, and the English language arts teachers have one, and the technology educators had one. And at that time, it looked very different. But that group is called MANACE, the Manitoba Association for Computing Educators. And MANACE does lots of things over the course of a year where they bring people together for, they used to call them technology information nights, or TIN nights, where we would get 3 different people to come out and share 20-minute sessions around whatever they're doing. Typically classroom teachers that are doing creative projects or using innovative approaches to the teaching in their classrooms. And they would just come together and share, and we would bring pizza in or feed them something simple, but it was really just coming together to network and share. And so that was at the heart of what I did for a lot of years. I sat on the MANACE board for 20 years, from the time that I was a classroom teacher into my role at the divisional level as a digital learning coach. And it was just about a year and a half ago that I stepped off that board just to hand the reins over to someone else. But really, through MANACE, I've had the opportunity to work with so many educators throughout the province of Manitoba and beyond. And it's just a great group to be part of. I felt like I was holding down the fort in some ways. Too many things were falling on me with some of the planning and facilitation of some of these events. So I just became the guy that was doing these things, and it almost didn't even always feel like a MANACE event. And in some ways, the nature of what we were coming together to talk about didn't really fit MANACE's mandate. So we moved outside that realm too. And so there were lots of different things. Sometimes it was just people coming together to share their stories and quick little snippets. I know at your time with Discovery Education, you did a lot of Ignite evenings around the world, really, all over North America. But that's something I've done here for many years. Just getting a slate of 8 to 10 speakers together, and everyone gets exactly 5 minutes on their timed slides that auto advance every 15 seconds. I just think there's so much to be said for educators coming together, even if it's outside their bubble. If it's you're coming together to hear a cook talk about their passion for making a hollandaise sauce without it breaking, or you want to hear a woodworker talking about how they like to do certain things to finish their pieces. As educators, I think we're stuck in our bubbles, and so much of what we learn is about education from other educators. But I think if we get out of that little bubble that we stick ourselves inside, there's a lot more learning that we can be exposed to, and we can take that back, and it means something to us as educators. I don't know
Well,
if that full answers
yeah,
your
no, but
question.
those are the two components I think that are really unique. And one is like the emphasis on the social experience, which is that's why you can't do this in a an in-service necessarily that's taking place during the day. You're on the clock. So that's why all these evening sessions tended to be, hey, we do whatever we want. We meet at King's Head Pub, or we're at wherever we are, or we'll share a beverage together, whatever that is. And then the second part I think that was really fascinating is that the learning was just about learning, not about school or about education. And so hearing from people who weren't, that you didn't have a sense of that. And it's funny how that, I just think that concept, if you laid that out for people, how much they go, that would be interesting to resonate. And that's what happened, right? Like you had a lot of people that would come because somebody said, oh, you should come out tonight and just hang out. And I think, again, I just love the consistency with which you did that over so many years. And again, you and I collaborated on a lot of these kind of events too. And that was the fun part of it. I guess the thing I wonder about is, again, and it seems like we're going to be for a long time talking about pre and post pandemic times. So the post pandemic time, I think, has brought about almost two competing mindsets. The one mindset is it's okay just to stay home and not do anything, and no one's going to bother you if you cancel something. The sort of the hyper focus on people's mental health and well-being allows people to just, at the end of the day, they shut down, they go home, and nobody's questioning that. On the other hand, this sort of deep-seated need for connection that we saw dissipate during that time still remains. And so that's where I think there's a weird time, because on the one hand, I think there's a real need for things of this nature. On the other hand, it's just more accepting, like no one's questioning you if you choose just to sit at home every day of your life if you want. That doesn't seem particularly healthy in my mind. But again, so I don't know how you see these kinds of ideas right now in 2026. And I know you've done a few things in the last couple of years, but I don't know if you've seen things change or not much change in terms of like appetite for this.
I have seen huge changes, and I would say a lot of them are related not just to the pandemic. The pandemic definitely did drive a lot more things home, but I think the tools themselves are partly to blame, because when I think back 20 years to that first event that we talked about where we first met, that was before we had the ability to connect with such ease with educators from all over the place.
Right.
When you wanted to go learn about a topic, you had to read about it in a book, you had to find it online somewhere, or you had to go sit with a group of educators to learn about a common theme or topic. Now, I feel like so many more educators are in control of their own professional learning, and they know where the tools are and how to find them that can help shape their own learning and their own thinking. So it doesn't always have to look like coming together and sitting in a room with your colleagues. Does that mean it's still the same quality or caliber of PD or professional learning? Not necessarily. But yeah, back then there were so many people that would come out for all of these things because there was an appetite for learning and thinking. And it all seemed so brand new. And I think we had that sort of in to our advantage, that people would come out just to learn about these things. And now I feel like people think they know so much about so many things, and they take it or leave it. If it's not something they're super curious about, they're just going to stay home that night. But yeah, so the numbers are certainly smaller with many of the events that I've done, even in recent years, even within the school division and the work that I do here. It's harder and harder to pull teachers out of their classrooms. I don't have the same kind of opportunities to bring together a group of 10 or 15 teachers for a half day. There's so many costs involved in that, from release time for
Sure.
subs and then the planning required for teachers. People just don't want to do it, and we don't have the space. There aren't enough subs available in the system. I also am involved in some conference planning as well, and I find even on that front, it's harder for teachers to get away from their school divisions
Yes.
for a day or two just because of all these competing demands on their time. So yeah, I think the tools have certainly changed what teachers need and want out of PD. It's a lot easier just to deliver some content directly to teachers to satisfy their appetite for learning. And I feel like now when you want to try and bring people together and you want to see some numbers, you want to actually see people come out and fill seats in your venue, there's got to be a draw. There's got to be a compelling sort of why.
Yeah, and I think when you say that though, I do think the shift needs to be like, for example, when we go back to, you very nicely laid out the fact that, oh, there's all these new opportunities and new things to learn, and that was the draw mostly. And then this side benefit was, oh, and you'll get to meet some really cool people. That was secondary. I guess what I'm wondering is if that model maybe needs to flip a little bit, because it is easier to do and learn on your own because of access and so forth. So maybe the shift has to be a little bit more around, but there's also like these really cool people. And I think about Chris Kennedy wrote a post about, I don't know, a month or 6 weeks ago, which was really living in my brain. And he was talking about young teachers' ways of being. And he's sharing this from the perspective of a veteran superintendent who's been around, who has the back in my day perspective. So he's very self-aware. But back in his day, back in our day, teachers were involved in extracurricular kind of things. They invested in the school. They stayed late. They did all this stuff. And there was benefits to that, whether that was improved relationships with your students, building culture, connecting with colleagues, all that stuff. Today, he said, young teachers are very mindful and protective of their time. And so they're more apt either to leave, not be involved in as many extracurricular things, and even things like having side hustles, because you live in a place like Vancouver in particular, like you might need an extra income. And so they have other hobbies and businesses that they're pursuing. And he just painted that as saying, I'm just presenting you, here's where it's at. I don't know how I feel about it, because I appreciate that young people and people are taking care of themselves in the way they need to in terms of sustainability. But I also know there's a loss to what the school experience can be, because you can't build a culture, you can't build community if you don't spend time with people. So that's what I think about what you're trying to do in terms of professional learning and stuff. Is I get it. You don't need to come here to learn how to use this tool that we used to do workshops on 20 years ago. But maybe there's other value here that we have to figure out a way to elevate that value.
And you use the word community, and community is key. It's really about getting connected with others. And so it's not even really about the content or the topic sometimes. It's about getting connected with people. And when we get those people connected, that can lead to so much more over time.
Well, and it just, in my mind, I would love, and I'd love to do a study, and that makes it, I'm just talking out loud at this point, thinking out loud, is I've had a few people on who have co-taught with others. They were team teachers. And every one of them that I can probably only name maybe 5 or so of these teams, but they talk about like how much more they love teaching as a result, because they've got a buddy that they're planning with, that they're teaching with, that they're supporting one another. Like it seems, man, if maybe we need to figure out more intentional ways that people are together. And the same thing, like when you're doing a project, it's one thing to do something by yourself, and that's fine, and it's probably the norm, but it's pretty special when you find somebody who's excited about something that you are, and you're doing it together.
Yeah. And even when you walk into a building where the climate of the school, the culture of the school has that in place, it's amazing. We've got 15 elementary schools in our school division, and there's a different feel inside every single one of those buildings.
Right.
But one of those schools in particular, one of the grade 4-5 teams of teachers, or the grade 4-5 team of teachers, they work so closely together. So it doesn't matter what day of the week you get to that school. You walk in an hour before the school day starts, those teachers are all huddled together in one classroom, laughing, sharing stories. But they're also planning, and they're being very thoughtful with their time. But that positivity that comes from that collaboration, it's amazing. And it's contagious. Like it spills over into the culture of their classrooms too.
100%. Yeah. Again, this is an age-old struggle with the structure of schools being as isolated they are. How do we overcome that? And so we have models that are showing us this is how. And again, even when we go back to the PD conversation, we're looking at high quality PD. I would make the argument that the PD that have been working towards is a high quality, and the outcome is not just the fact that somebody learned something they didn't know before, but they've met somebody they didn't know before, and they have even the number of times, I know, Andy, over the years that you and I would email back and forth about an idea, or I'm trying to do this, or can you help me with this? Like we had people at our disposals that we could reach out to help us. And so I think about that concept. I'm teaching again at the university, and I think about these are relatively young educators, and thinking, how do I help them figure out a way to build a network and a community? And again, you mentioned the school that you go to, then fortunate for that group of people who are in that school, but not everybody has that built-in community that they can just walk into, because that community didn't come. Somebody built that. Somebody created that culture, right? And that didn't just happen by accident. There was some intention behind that. Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know if we'll shift gears a little bit, but slightly. So as we think about this show, this is a show about leadership, and that's been a big part of your role and what you're doing. I just wonder if you have any sort of leadership challenges that you think about that you had to handle at some point in your career, whether you did well in that challenge, didn't do well in that challenge, but like you thought like that was a difficult time or period of time in your career. So what's your leadership challenge that you would share?
I feel like as much as we talk about the pandemic as being such a defining moment in all of our lives, I feel like it would have to revolve somehow around that, just because the work that I'd been doing for years leading up to that as a digital learning coach in our school division, I felt like I was trying to impart a bunch of skills and abilities on our teachers to do the kinds of things that were required at that time. But not all the teachers had bought into it, and many had never dabbled with the idea of remote teaching or using some kind of an online environment to connect with their students. And we had to move a whole lot of people forward really quickly. I can't remember any years that I was as busy as that year.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just a couple of months. Once it started, we were in it so deep. And at that point in time, we as a school division were actually looking at communication and just the tools that we use to connect with one another. internally and externally. And we had just launched this divisional portal for staff where we put a bunch of resources, but it was brand new for teachers. And then when the pandemic hit, we had to really look at the tools that teachers could use. So we
Right.
fired up our Microsoft license so quickly. We had all the pieces in place. We had all the accounts ready to go because we were working towards that. But we just had to dive in headfirst to try and teach 850 teachers overnight how to use Microsoft Teams for their online meetings and online classes. And how do we connect or collect work from our students and get the marks back to them? It was so brand new for so many people. So just trying to get out ahead of that. I created a bunch of video screencasts that kind of walk through all the basic aspects of Teams meetings so that teachers on their time, when they had 5 minutes or 10 minutes, could just sit and watch a 2-minute screencast or watch a few of those in a row and know how the tools worked. I felt like it worked pretty well in supporting our divisional staff at that time. It got us through that pinch in a way that we were still able to maintain a pretty high caliber of teaching and learning through the pandemic. But it was so brand new. And yeah, it was probably the biggest challenge that any of us will ever have to encounter in education. But yeah, there were some eyes on that too. I know when I had done a Teams live event, which was a newer function within Teams where it was like a structured meeting where you could have different speakers and different places come on to your live stream. So I had created a Teams live event for our educators. So everyone, not everyone, but we probably had 350 teachers that joined this real-time meeting. Our superintendent came and talked about the need to use these tools. Like a bunch of educators, early, middle, senior years, were talking about how the tools were helping them to connect with students. So it helped people to see that they were part of something bigger, helped the teachers to get connected to one another in some ways, and gave them the ability to use those tools. Even though they may not have had a lot of experience before that, I felt like I helped them to be prepared and equipped. Some of those teachers now will not even look at some of these tools just because they're scarred. They don't like the memories of having to teach in that way. So as much as our teachers all and our students all have access to these tools, some of them aren't being leveraged to their full potential now because of what they associate the tools with.
Yeah. Can you give the opposite of that? So can you talk about teachers who maybe did embrace it and thought, okay, this is what we have to do for now. This was never about let's embrace digital or virtual learning as the primary way of educating our kids, but maybe talk about some of the teachers who said, yeah, this actually has value and use, and I'm going to continue to leverage these once kids are in my room.
I think that's where that community comes into play again, too. The people that you have forged relationships with over the years, when there's that increased sharing that happens, they're happy to come to me and show me what they've created or what they've designed or how they've handled this approach. And so I win every single time just because of all these folks that come back to me to pay it forward. And then I can in turn share those stories forward with others, teachers in our school division and beyond. So I feel like everybody wins when we're connecting with one another and we're sharing the things we're doing. Teaching is not a career that should ever be done in isolation. As a classroom teacher, keep your door open. Let other people see what's happening in your classroom. Don't keep it guarded and feel like you're the only one that's got these good ideas that can benefit your students. I think that sharing is such a big component.
There are people, I think, lots of maybe young people, early educators who are thinking they're maybe in a classroom now, but they're thinking, oh, maybe one day Andy McKiel's not going to be having his job forever. I wouldn't mind that job. So what do you tell like a 25-year-old or in Winnipeg, St. James, Assiniboine, what advice do you give them to say if they're thinking, I wouldn't mind working at that level as a coach, consultant? Like, what advice would you give them?
I think it's been a really interesting role just because it's given me so many opportunities. And I would encourage anyone who wants to get into a role like this to make a run for it. I think the key is just being very transparent. If you don't know how something works or why we do things like this, ask questions. And if you don't know who to ask questions of, ask everybody that question, because then you'll get some answers. I think we need to be open and honest in our own sort of skills and abilities. I think as teachers, it benefits everyone if we just come to the table with the knowledge that we own and think about how we can share what we're doing with others. I know I just said something about connecting and sharing, but really those are the two words I would use for all new teachers or teachers that are just entering this profession. You want to love what you do and you want to do what you love. And so everyone's got their own interests and their own sort of skill set that they bring to their classroom. Think about what you're most passionate about and share that with others. Share it with your students first and foremost. And that way you're going to develop very meaningful connections with your kids. But then throughout the school, you're going to be a bigger part of the school community. You're contributing in bigger ways if you're sharing the kinds of things you're doing. And people see and get a good read on who you are and what you do. When I think about so many of my colleagues that are working at the district level here in my school division, I think it's very clear what every single one of those people is passionate about. I could go around the room and I could tell you the one thing that really clearly defines who that person is. And it has helped them to get into the role that they're in. It's what helped me to get my job. It's what helped our literacy coach to get her job. And I think our district is small enough that our senior administrative team and our school principals, they recognize the talents that people bring to the classroom and they nurture those and they support those. And when you're given the opportunity to do something you love, it just makes you work that much harder and it helps more people to see the kinds of things that you're doing. So I'm not sure if that's a direct answer to the question, but
sure.
yeah,
Well,
think about
I
your
think,
content.
yeah. And I think I would always advocate for the same thing is bring your passion to it. So if your passion is cooking, woodworking, reading, whatever that is, even just as a classroom teacher, don't try and necessarily suppress those passions and figure out ways that you can. I remember even as a young teacher, I was teaching grade 3 or something like grade 3 or it was early elementary. And as a sport, I love sports. And so I would constantly be thinking, like, we designed logos and art and for hockey jerseys. And so I would bring all those things. And you could say you're thrusting yeah, I was obviously, but I was passionate about it. So the effort that I would bring to those kinds of tasks with kids and try to get them excited about it, they see that excitement on you. So even if it's something that they themselves or others saying, I'm not really interested in woodworking, Andy, but you are, your passion for that is infectious, can be infectious, even if that's not the exact thing that you're interested in. No, I appreciate that advice. And again, I think the other thing that surfaced from your share there, I don't know if you actually used the word, but I just think of that curiosity, like being just really curious. That is such a driver. That's the advantage. Like, we are a learning organization. So curiosity should be a fundamental tenet that you bring to things, because I would like to know more. I want to learn about this thing. Hey, you're in the right place. That's what our whole thing is about. And so if you can some way demonstrate the fact that I don't know, here's the thing, I don't know how this organization works. I don't know how you go. And I don't think people necessarily, in fact, I would say if you're asking a question about like, how does this happen in your organization, sort of the internal workings, because you don't really know, which is true for a lot of people. I know that most people in those administrative roles are very excited that you asked that question and are happy to explain, oh, this is how it works. We have a board of trustees who does whatever the question is. They walk you through the inner workings, if you will, because that's often people that are trying to take on a role like yours. There's some inner workings, inside baseballish stuff that they don't know, and ask. We'll help you kind of navigate those. And we live those every day. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of folks that are afraid to ask those questions because then it becomes apparent that you don't know everything.
Right.
And you might start feeling like, oh, do I even know enough? So yeah, ask those questions because you need those answers. And the only way you're going to get them is by being a little bit vulnerable, maybe, and asking those questions.
100%. The last question, and then we'll just get a couple rapid fires to wrap it up. So you got to name one person in your education world that you are grateful for today. And I say the word today because it might not be the person that, like, everybody's got a ton of people on this list. And there's people that if I was asking you to rank it, you might think differently. I'm not asking you to find necessarily the top person on this, or maybe, but just a person. So it could be just somebody you bumped into today and say, oh yeah, I thought about them, and I'm really grateful for them. You got to name one person that you're grateful for in education, and bonus if they might be listening to this today, that'd be even better.
I thought long and hard about this, and it is hard to really whittle it down to one person, but I'm going to have to go with Ryan Miller. And Ryan is a name that most of your listeners probably would not know. He's a middle years administrator here in my school division. But the reason I'm choosing Ryan is because I've learned so much from him, and I think he's learned a couple things from me. And the reason I'm choosing Ryan today is because we were just talking about pre-service teachers and teachers that are just starting their career. When I was in my third year of teaching, not even feeling like I had all the answers and I knew what I was doing, I had a student teacher that year, a teacher candidate, and it was Ryan Miller who walked in the door. So he started his education journey learning to be a teacher in my classroom. And not only did I share some of my ideas with him, but he pushed me in ways that I never really thought I needed pushing. I was teaching a grade 4 sound unit. He said, "Hey, do you play guitar?" And he actually encouraged me to bring my guitar into the classroom. I really don't play guitar. I muddle through it to the best of my ability. But he gave me the confidence to bring my guitar in to teach some concepts around sound. But then we taught our class how to sing a song, taught them the lyrics, and we performed it at a school-wide assembly. I've never played my guitar in front of hundreds of people before that, and I've never done it since then. But the ways that he challenged me, I think, are very profound. And as he's risen through the ranks over the years, going from a classroom teacher to a guidance counselor to a vice principal and principal of several different schools, he's involved me in so many of the projects that he's done at the school level in so many ways. And I just appreciate that collaboration that has happened over time. And going back to that idea of passion, Ryan is a musician. Long before he came into education, that's one of the ways he was making his living is by being in a band and touring and writing songs. And he's still a prolific songwriter, but he uses songwriting in his current role as an administrator. He calls them song mosaics, where the students bring in some of the ideas for lyrics and he melds them all together and creates melodies out of things. But such a powerful practice. And I've seen so many really amazing examples of where that can take students. So I'm always inspired by him. We don't just work together professionally. We get together socially on occasion too. And always gives us lots to talk about and lots to think about, and things pay forward into the work we do.
Nice. Yeah. And I'm gonna take an opportunity to share a little bit of gratitude specifically to you and for this is so I think I've won 2 awards in my life. I don't even know if it's awards. I won an award in grade 12 for highest mark in accounting or whatever it was, some weird thing that I got a scholarship for or something of that nature. And then the other one was in 2010, which is a long time ago. I got this. I mean, in some circles, people think it's a big deal. Other people have never heard of it, but whatever. The 2010 ISTE Outstanding Leader of the Year Award, which sounds pretty amazing in one respect. But that was because of you. So for the story goes this. So ISTE, the International Society for Technology Education, big, it's the ed tech top conference organization, if you will, would give out this award. And there's lots of really cool people that have won that award. But you had to be affiliated. You have to have and Saskatchewan did not. And I wasn't even thinking of it. Saskatchewan has no affiliated. Their ed tech team or organization is not affiliated with ISTE. But Manace is affiliated with ISTE. And so you reached out to me and saying, "Hey, we'd like to nominate," and you're nominating someone from Saskatchewan to have this award. And so anyway, the story goes that you started that thing, and I was fortunate enough to be given that award. But that was because of you. Again, I would never have thought of that. So that was obviously very grateful that you had done that. You didn't need to do that one. You had lots of people in your own province you could have nominated, but you chose me. So I'm very grateful for that.
Full disclosure, Dean, and I'm hoping that you already know this and it's not going to blindside you, but I'm not the one who initiated that. On behalf of Manace, we were proud to put your name forward as a candidate for this award, but it was really Kathy Cassidy from another name that many of your viewers
I didn't know that actually, but anyway.
Okay. So Kathy had long wanted to do something like that to recognize all of the things you had brought to the table in Saskatchewan. But because you did not have any ISTE affiliates, she had reached out to me, and in talking, it took me about half a second to agree with her that, yes, this would be a really good idea. Yeah, I love that you're thanking me for that.
But
On behalf of
yeah, you are like, you're the person that has to put that in motion. So at any rate, you didn't need to do that, but you did. And so anyways, always grateful for that. All
well,
right.
and so deserving of that award.
Appreciate that. So last three quick questions to get you out of here. Anything you're reading and or listening to today on the professional side of things, something that you're learning via text or audio?
Not paper-based. I've been doing more audiobooks than physical paper books these days, but David Alexander Robertson's 52 Ways to Reconcile is what I'm currently working through. And it's a really powerful listen or read just because he offers so many really great strategies for all Canadians to think about to really move toward or further along the path towards reconciliation.
The
And I
local
love
Winnipeg. He's a local Winnipeg guy, isn't he?
he's a Winnipegger, yeah, and he's won many
Yeah.
awards for his books, lots of graphic novels, some amazing literature for adults, some great stuff for some picture books for young kids. But this one, it's the 52 strategies. It's really one thing you could do every week of the year. And some of them are really simple things, and many of them are things we're probably all doing, or many of us are doing in various ways. But I just think it's really great structure, and he shares so many meaningful things. And
Cool.
it drives so much more of my own professional learning.
Good. What about on the entertainment side, binge watching or whatever, however you want to frame it, a movie, a good series that sort of captured your attention? I'm always curious to hear what people have on that side of things.
I would say the best show I've watched or have been watching in the last couple of years is The Pit. It's on
Yes.
Crave. Many folks are probably already watching it. Before going into education, I worked in healthcare. I was an orderly in an emergency room in Winnipeg here. And coming face to face with life and death on the daily is just very eye-opening. And of all the medical dramas and shows that I've watched over the years, none of them are as authentic as this one is. Noah Wiley, the creator of the show, is from ER way back in the day.
Right.
And yeah, so and for those that haven't watched, the framework or the concept of the structure of the show, I think is really powerful too. Every season is basically a shift. So each episode is 1 hour in the day in the life. And when you think about what that means, like over the course of the whole season, really this story unfolds in one working shift, but every episode is just so heavy and powerful. So it's exhausting almost to watch it, but I think gives you some good insight into life and living.
Well, it's interesting because we watched season 1 binge form. We just zipped through them all in whatever it was, 3 days or something like that. This one, though, we're watching it weekly as they come out. So it's I'm trying to juxtapose how it's a slightly different experience, but maybe that week in between gives you a chance to catch your breath. But the actual experience of those people, they don't get a chance to catch their breath because they're going from this to that thing. And it is very fascinating. No, I'm with you on that one.
But I watched it in the same way. And it's funny because it takes us back 20 years, doesn't it? Like when we didn't have the ability to binge watch shows, we had to wait till the next
forward to
week
Thursday or
what's
whatever
gonna
day the
happen.
thing comes out. So yeah, cool.
And it's hard to wait that week.
Right. Yeah, that's just the way it was. And I think too, though, to that point, I think shows used to be simpler because they knew you had to wait. So they didn't include a lot of detail that if you had missed it the week before, you're going to lose it here. Whereas now I think they include a lot more. These shows are highly complex with like little storylines that when you watch it consecutively, you remember. But now with this case, it's, oh yeah, I forgot. This was the patient they had last. He's over in that waiting room and he's got this thing or whatever it is. So it's probably more designed for you actually to binge it than to have these spacings in between. But all right, last question. And I've had lots of people from Winnipeg on the show. So I'm always curious to see if you come up with something different. So the idea is, what's the lesser known hidden gem in Winnipeg or area that you would suggest people check out? And I have one in mind that I think that I'm wondering if you might say it, but I don't know if you will. Anyway, go ahead.
Is it Back Alley Arctic? Is that what you have in mind?
No, it was the snake pits.
Oh, okay. That's a good one too. And for a few reasons, I can see why you would think that. No, I'm going to stick a little closer to Winnipeg proper. And I'm not sure if any of your previous Manitobans have talked about this, but Back Alley Arctic.
No.
If you Google it, it's definitely something worth seeing. There's an artist / activist here in Winnipeg. Her name is Cal Barteski, and she's known as the polar bear painter. She paints polar bears. along with a bunch of other things. But she has done this really incredible thing. She lives in the Wolseley area of Winnipeg, and she was finding that her back lane was a scary place in some ways. There was a lot of just dirt and debris, and it wasn't a nice place to be. So she painted her garage door, and then she went around and she asked all kinds of her neighbors, hey, do you mind if I paint something on your garage door? And so she's painted basically, it's a living art gallery where there's about 20 garage doors that are all painted with different Arctic animals. And you're not allowed to drive through there. You just walk through back alley Arctic, but it's all connected. And Cal has done all kinds of amazing things. For anyone who visits the town of Churchill, if they're ever going to see polar bears, there are murals all over walls in buildings and structures in that town. And Cal was the artist who championed the Seawalls Churchill project and brought 14, 15 artists in from around the world to paint these murals. So it's a great way there's no cost. You just walk
Yeah,
up this back
I love
lane,
that.
doesn't take very long. And just as a quick little aside, if it's the middle of winter and you don't feel like walking anywhere in -40, one indoor option has nothing to do with Cal Barteski and Back Alley Arctic. Kilter Brewing is a little tap room. We've got a bunch of great tap rooms in Winnipeg, lots of local breweries now, but the Kilter Brewery, I've used that space a couple of times now to host some of these Ignite events. We bring 100 people out. They let us rent the place out, and it's a great space. Even if you're not a drinker, if you just like to go have a non-alcoholic beverage, they've got options on tap. But it's just a space that brings people together for various things. It's relaxed, it's comfortable, but it's got its own vibe, and it's just a good place.
Awesome. Well, I really like back alley Arctic. That's something I definitely will do next time. So those are the perfect kinds of hidden gems I like people sharing. So anyway, Andy,
For
thank
what
you
it-
so much. Yes, sorry.
For what it's worth, your viewers might be able to find it on Google Street View if you are in
Okay.
Google Maps. So with a little creative Googling, you might actually be able to virtually walk up
Right.
Back
But I
Alley
think I'd
Arctic.
rather, I think I want to take the walk. I want to do that at some point. So
Next time you're
anyway,
coming through Winnipeg, let
I
me know.
will. All
I'll
right.
take you for a walk.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Andy, for your time. This is always good to catch up. And I've appreciated you over the years. And I think your vibe around how to bring people together and build community is something that you and I both share that passion for. And I appreciate all the work you've done in Manitoba in particular. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, team. Thanks for the chat.